Welcome to the Neighborhood News Network. I'm your host, Kevin Frazier, and this is the news close to you. And now, here's our civic update from Joel Ingardio. Thanks so much for joining us, Joel.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. This is a great idea to bring news to the neighborhoods. I love it.
Awesome. Well, Joel, tell us, what's the latest at City Hall?
Well, unfortunately, City Hall is facing a huge budget crisis. It is pretty epic, unlike what we've seen even in the Great Recession. So it's, buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Bumpy ride. Just how bumpy is it going to get, Joel? What are we looking at here?
Well, you know, in the boom times, when things were like going gangbusters, we were already at a deficit. We were at a $420 million deficit in the boom times. And the reason for that is because we were spending money wildly. Our budget has grown to $13 billion. That's doubled in just 10 years. And now we are hit by this huge economic crash. So that 420 million, it was initially thought to be 1.7 billion.
Jeez.
That was last month. Now they're saying 2.5 billion. And our city controller was quoted in the Chronicle recently saying, I have stopped making predictions because every week it just keeps getting worse. So we're looking at probably at least $2.5 billion deficit over the next 2 years. So it's serious business.
Wow. So just in the span of a couple of months, we've seen an already huge $420 million deficit grow to something perhaps 5 times or even greater than that, to more than 2.5 billion. Geez, those are staggering numbers, Joel. Tell us, give us some hope here, Joel. What's the strategy to begin to climb out of this massive hole?
Well, we do have something called the Rainy Day Fund, and we have reserves. Problem is our reserves are only 750 million. So it's going to be pretty painful cuts at City Hall is the only way out. Now, to give it perspective, historical perspective, in 2009, during the Great Recession, at that time, the mayor took a 15% pay cut that was Gavin Newsom was the mayor at the time, 15% pay cut to the mayor's salary. All department heads took a 10% pay cut. And anyone working in the mayor's office who earned over $100,000, they took a 10% pay cut. And the reason for that is we had 26,000 city employees.
Wow.
That's a lot of employees for a city about 800,000 people, 26,000 employees. So that adds up, right? All the salaries and whatnot. So in the 10 years when the economy just soared, today we have more than 40,000 city employees. The only way to really address this is we're going to have to do what we did historically, and cut some salaries. You can't just wipe out the fire department and save $1 billion. Like, you just can't do that, right? You need to, you're gonna have to cut some of that largesse, or that we've grown fat, right, over the last 10 years. So, and the thing is, the population of San Francisco has increased in the last 10 years, but only by about 80,000 people. So we added a lot of city employees for just that 80,000 population increase. So we're going to have to really dial that back.
Well, tough times ahead. You heard it here from Mr. Joel Ingardio. Thanks again for joining us, Joel. We look forward to your next City Hall update.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a special report from our correspondent, Jeremy Strickland.
Howdy, everyone. My name is Jeremy Strickland. Today, I'm speaking with Phyllis of Gaslight and Shadows Antiques in the Richmond district of SF. Phyllis, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. It's a pleasure being here.
So glad to have you. Well, Phyllis, you've been a small business owner in San Francisco since 1976. Can you please tell our viewers at home how you came to San Francisco and why you want to open, and what made you want to open an antique shop?
I was born in San Francisco, and actually I was born in the neighborhood, the Richmond district. So I went to school here, grammar school, junior high, high school, college. So how I opened my antique store was I was an importer of antiques from Afghanistan in the early 70s. And I opened my store in 76 after visiting a lot of antique stores and selling to them, I had a passion to have an antique store. So I've been here 44 years, and it's the love of my life. This store is the love of my life.
So one of the things that I often like to ask for people who have been in an area for a good number of years is, over time, I'm sure you've seen the Richmond district and San Francisco change tremendously. How have you seen the city evolve? And what do you think were some of the biggest factors that have pushed SF in its current very heavy tech direction?
So I was a college student during the 60s. And, you know, back in the 60s, the city was all about love and friendship and music. And then the 70s, when I opened the store, San Francisco was very working class, middle class. You can have a meal for $1. You could go to North Beach and get a 5-course meal for $5. And when I opened the store, people loved anything old. I could sell anything old. By the 80s, people started learning about antiques, and they knew the names of what they were collecting. And I had to really learn like everything, all the names of the crystal makers and the art glass and the pottery. And I had so many books, you know, a huge library of reference books. And what happened in the 80s was a terrible thing. I had a lot of gay customers. They were fabulous shoppers. They just loved antiques, and they knew what they were buying. And then they started dying. The AIDS epidemic hit our city like crazy. And I lost so many customers. It was so tragic. And so now the pandemic, oh, here we go again. But, you know, honestly, yeah, I've been closed for 3 months, but I started a photography restoration business that I could do online. That kept the rent going a bit. I got a little bit of a PPP loan, but that money is going to go to paying the landlord back his rent. So the store keeps going. Gaslight the shadows forever.
That's awesome. You know, what an inspirational story to hear. I would love to dive in just a little bit deeper about each one of those big kind of significant moments. So you mentioned quite a few here. That was obviously the kind of the AIDS epidemic of the 1980s. How has the current COVID situation, accompanied with the now kind of burgeoning Black Lives Matter movement, not only affected your business, but how is it similar to some of these past trials and tribulations that you've experienced?
Similar in that you probably don't have as many customers. This store for me has never been about the money. It's about how can I help people and help me, because I love the store. It's, you know, this is my living room, by the way. It's, you know, I feel like this is my living room. I come to it 6 days a week. So throughout all this, the people are always there. They can't spend as much during certain times, and other times they can.
So obviously the common thread there has been fewer customers coming into the store. As business professionals, we often think about how we can make our business more resilient. I would love to just understand, as somebody who's been through so much over the years, how have you remained resilient during these times? And what advice would you give to other small and medium business owners on being resilient?
Change your focus. You know, so most of us look at everything the same way all the time. Every situation that I've been through, I had to change my thinking. Like, well, I can't sit in the store and sell to anybody anymore. What should I do? So you have to be open-minded, and like, I'm a photographer. I don't always look at everything from the same perspective. You have to look from different perspectives all the time. So if you can't sell in a store anymore, maybe you can sell with other people somewhere else, like shows, or definitely the internet. I mean, I can't believe that my stuff was selling. Oh, that reminds me, I have to pack a vase to ship today. I got an email that I sold another vase.
Well, to let you get to that, I just have one final question for you. And it's how we always like to kind of end our time together. How can residents of San Francisco continue to support local businesses like Gaslight and Shadows Antiques in the upcoming days and weeks?
they could shop locally with us, and they will be able to come into our stores. I think people are compassionate. I think they care. And I know that in San Francisco, they don't want to lose us. We are the flavor, and that we make the city interesting. To lose all your little stores and small businesses and small restaurants, it would change the whole flavor of the city. We are what makes this city fabulous. Go San Francisco.
Love it. Love it. That's so awesome to hear.
We are now joined by Stop Crime SF President Frank Noto for an update on public safety.
Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you on board. There's no denying that too many San Franciscans don't feel safe, respected, or protected. We could have a long conversation about the reforms that have been offered, but for now, let's focus, Frank, on your crime update based off of information that's been collected, importantly, before the recent protests. So, Frank, what exactly are these numbers saying?
We looked at the San Francisco Police Department's CompStat crime reports, and they show that in April, murders soared by 67% when compared to the same month in 2019. That was the second consecutive month with an increase in homicides because they went up 25% in March, and they're also up for the whole year to date by 25% when compared to the previous year.
My gosh. So murder rates are up year over year as well as month over month. And are we seeing this sort of increase in crime in other types of crime as well?
Yes. Burglaries are up 40% for the month of April. There are 573 reported burglaries in April, and they rose 39% the previous month over March figures. And I think if you look at the boarded up stores by merchants around town, you'll see that our local businesses have no confidence that crime is going to go down.
Right. So even with this sheltering in place and before the recent protests, we've seen across the board crime increases. Is there any explanation for why we've seen such an uptick?
Well, that's a good question. And it's possible, we're only looking at 4 months of the year. So some of it could be a little bit random, but I think it's complex, and I think it's the combination of a catch and release district attorney, the courts, the pandemic, of course, and an overworked police force. The pandemic has removed car break-ins as an option for most criminals. So the small time gangs that commit most of the car thefts in San Francisco have moved on. San Francisco had the worst rate in the nation among big cities for car break-ins, but now those criminals have moved on to burglaries and robberies, and that's why we see those are going up. Robberies today they're up by 3% for the whole year, and of course you've already heard about the burglaries being up. The police are busy. That they stopped arresting people for dealing drugs because police investigators were put on patrol during the pandemic. That's why so many people in the Tenderloin, for example, have died of drug overdoses, way up over previous years.
Frank, you've given us all the more reason to continue to stay safe to one another. Those are staggering stats, and hopefully we'll begin to see a decrease. But thank you again for joining us, Frank. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Neighborhood News Network. We'll see you next time. And remember, your news is our news.